Are environmental causes the reason for your child's severe autism diagnosis? You may not know this, but there is emerging data that shows that chemical toxicity, including exposure to food dyes, fragrances, can contribute to the severity of autism through several different mechanisms. And these chemicals can disrupt neurodevelopment, immune function, and overall health, which may exacerbate symptoms in individuals with autism. And here's how. If we choose to not to not address the fact that our children are being exposed to massive amounts of toxins from often us as parents who are just not knowing, this is what can happen to and how it impacts their bodies. So in the realm of food dyes and additives, neurotoxic effects like synthetic dyes and artificial colors, especially red 40, yellow 5, and blue 1, can have neurotoxin effects. There's actual data that shows this. Studies have shown that these dyes can lead to hyperactivity, attention deficits, and behavioral issues, which can worsen our children on the spectrum symptoms. It also impacts behavioral changes. Food dyes do contribute to behavioral problems. This is not something that people are pulling out of their behind. I hate to say it like that, but so much controversy, and people who talk about this often will get thrown under the rug to say there's no data, but there is data. There's lots of data. And these changes can obviously compound on the severity of your child with autism. How does it impact? How do these red food colorings impact, or these environmental factors or causes still impact the immune system? Allergic reactions. Some children with autism have heightened sensitivity to certain food dyes. They can lead to allergic reactions that can cause gastrointestinal issues like diarrhea, vomiting, skin reactions, and other symptoms that many physicians, I don't want to say choose to ignore because that's not the word I'm looking for, but are unsure of how to diagnose because they are almost seem systemic. And of course, we know that food dyes and anything in the chemical sensitivities can impact the gut-brain axis, so the gut microbiota. Food dyes can absolutely disrupt and imbalance your child's gut and microbiota, which they play a crucial role in brain health and behavior. So an imbalance in gut microbiota can not just affect their mood, but their cognition, which means their ability, their academics, their behavior, potentially, again, worsening your child's symptoms. So things like VOCs, if you've never heard of VOCs, it's a short term for volatile organic compounds. So these are organic and still can cause disruptions. So neurodevelopmental impact of VOCs is fragrances especially. Now, we're not looking in the realm of essential oils. We're looking at the fragrances that have a component sometimes of natural sources, but then also have adulteration to these products. So inhalation of these chemicals can impact brain function development, and it increases the severity of autism in many cases. Respiratory issues. So we know now that the state of our air is impacted. There's a lot of data. Actually, I just got to sit through 2 presentations where there was actual links of causation for autism and the pollution in the air. And this is one of these cases to look at. Endocrine disruptions as well, when we look at VOCs, is that anything that has fragrance can disrupt our endocrine system. Now, our endocrine system is a fancy word to say our chemistry. So the chemistry and our hormone system. People assume that just women have hormones, but we don't. If this is your first time learning about the endocrine system, think of it as the hormone system that all of us have as both female and male. Our thyroid, our reproductive organs, our pituitary gland, all of these are interconnected in a very, very synergistic and what would seem complex system, but when we talk about the things that impact it, they're very simple. It's when we've changed our environment that our hormone system has changed dramatically over the years, especially in the last 10 to 100 years, 10 to 50 years, really. Sensory overload. If you have a child who has sensory processing disorder, VOCs are going to be impactful. Not only do they heighten sensory sensitivities just due to the nature of the sensory stimulus, but also by impacting neurotransmitters and causing things like anxiety, agitation, and behavioral issues. Now, why does this happen in our child's body? So what is going on in our child's body? And one of these things is called oxidative stress. If this is your first time learning about oxidative stress, it means that our body from an external source, and sometimes even internal, is their cells are being damaged. So oxidative stress means and in like the case of food dyes or environment, these chemicals are leading to the production of free radicals and that can damage the brain cells. And this can impair cognitive function and of course, make our children more severe. The inflammatory response of these chemicals, both from a liver perspective, but also a systemic perspective, is huge. When we absorb synthetics through our largest organs, or we ingest them, or we breathe them in, all of these contribute to a micro-inflammatory response. And if we're doing this consistently every single day, these acute inflammatory responses become what we call chronic. And chronic responses lead to diseases, and diseases that come from our environment are now, they're stating 95% of our chronic illnesses are actually environmental and lifestyle conditions. So understand, or having that knowledge that it starts in our children, that they are the first step with a system for detoxification that isn't even fully developed yet. Detoxification pathways, so even just using certain medications like Tylenol and have been shown to impact the glutathione pathway. There is data for this specifically. And so some individuals are sensitive and they have genetic vulnerabilities based on the environment that they grew up with in the womb. We're in generations of not knowing how these foods and how these chemicals that have not been tested are actually impacting our bodies generationally. And so we're in a time where the severity of autism is very much so in correlation and matching some of the toxic exposures that we're having both in utero and also after delivery. So hello, my name is Natalie Pelto, and I am the co-founder of Blue Life RX, a health and wellness company and initiative that focuses on bringing lifestyle medicine to physicians to help improve our healthcare system and for their patients, but also for our kids and families on the that have children on the spectrum and ADHD. I personally have a mission and vision of seeing our children have better outcomes, move to reclaim these lost milestones so that they can actually integrate into society, independent, in communication, and just absolutely living the life of their dreams. So if you are interested in learning more about that, we have weekly content. Make sure to subscribe, like, and follow, and we will drop those in. So coming back to environmental factors. So I want to start off by sharing a little bit of my journey of why I came to where I am today. So first of all, for those of you who know me, you know that I had a child who at 2 years old was fighting, 2 till 7 years old was fighting a severe nonverbal diagnosis. My son actually didn't even start speaking until much after 6 years, close to 6 years old, a little after 6 years old. And this was due to a very intensive lifestyle intervention. My son only ate 3 foods. And so it propelled me into taking extra education as a healthcare worker who was specialized in a multidisciplinary area, specifically in diagnostics. So in other words, I was very, very experienced in seeing the inside of the human body pathology in many different settings. And it was not a far stretch for me to understand that disease in the body could come from the lifestyle we were living, because I was seeing it internally on the day-to-day. And as my son continued to just make progress, to reclaim his milestones, to get to greater gains, to the point where at 7.5, he was released from all care. I think that he continued in speech maybe for a year after, only to catch up. Emotional intelligence, I would say, was completely where a neurotypical child, if not even better, for his age or better, would be at around 9. And so it propelled me to educate about this consistently for free, as I shared about my passion back then, which was integrating essential oils, basically like what I used to call plant therapy, into people's lives. But there was a missing link. And the missing link was the foundations of lifestyle medicine, which encompasses 6 pillars of health that all have major impact on our lifestyle. And these pillars fall in the categories, and these are pillars where our physicians can be board certified, fall in the areas of risky substances, which I love to, they call, smoking and addictive behavior. And for me and our kids, there is nothing that is worse than the toxicity that we have in our environment that is legal and available in our grocery stores in the form of food, cleaners, and fragrances and things like Glade plugins. And so I began this journey as a healthcare worker, transitioned to nutritional therapy, transitioned to detox specialist, and then continued to receive education until I, came to my 7 certifications and now working on a 8th. And so I came to this space wanting to help other people. And the way that I can help other people the best is to allow them to have the knowledge that the world that we live in is not necessarily exactly as we often perceive it in our accepted societal environment. What I mean by that is, in society, it is very acceptable for every house to have Glade plugins. It is very acceptable for every house to have 10 bags of chips for company and themselves. It is very acceptable to go eat ice cream every day. And it is, and the reason that I'm sharing this in this way is that there is a passion around knowledge and motivation. And right now I'm hoping that the knowledge that I'm sharing is going to instill motivation. And with that motivation, there also needs to be a transition into mindset. And from my title here, if you are watching this video up till now, we have been working towards understanding where your child and their exposome, their accumulation of toxicity for generations is coming from. Because most of these things happen not in this generation, but have happened in past generations. And they can happen from anywhere. And in order for you to have the knowledge, I'm going to give you 7 tips of different areas that we can question for generations where environment could have impacted our current child and their brain development. The first one is prenatal and perinatal factors. So this is understanding our pregnancy, understanding our mom's pregnancy, and of course her own pregnancy. C-sections can disrupt the microbiome. Deficiencies in nutrients, that if we're in our 3rd generation of eating ultra-processed foods, our moms did not have the nutrient capacity to help with efficient brain development. Not a judgment. Most of us are completely, to this day, unaware of this knowledge. Exposures to toxins, prenatal exposures from so many different areas, pesticides, heavy metal, example, mercury and lead that can now be found in foods, medical things, and many other things. Pollution, which now has been linked to severity of ASD. And these substances can and do disrupt neurodevelopment. Infections, if we were pregnant, I was one of these. I had to have a recurrent rounds of antibiotics for a kidney stone because my diet was so poor. The next area to look at is birthing complications, premature births, low birth weights. Have there been, these are also sometimes linked to the possibility of having neurodevelopmental conditions. Hypoxia, lack of oxygen during the birth, can cause minute brain damage and can contribute to the severity of autism. And then number 3 is postnatal environmental factors. So this is after a child has been born. Environmental exposures to heavy metals. I'm not even going to say where they come from because this video will get taken down. Continued exposure to environmental toxins during early childhood can continue to exacerbate. Yes, there is data on this. We know that children on the spectrum generally test higher for things like mercury and lead. Nutritional deficiencies, Postnatal deficiencies because our children start to become picky eaters. Things like omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins and minerals impair brain function and mitochondrial function. Number 4 area to question, parental and family factors that you have right now. So your age as a parent, were you someone who had a child in their 20s, 30s, or even 40s? These things can impact neurodevelopmental conditions. The family stress and socioeconomic status. So it is true that families that live in lower socioeconomic status tend to have higher levels of autism. And unfortunately, it also limits early intervention, which means it increases the severity due to lack of support and resources. Number 5 to look at is the environmental enriching, and is the environment enriched and stimulating. So early intervention and education. Did your child have access to things outside of a screen? Were they stimulated for movement and all of the areas that help to wire the brain? Educational resources are great, but they don't need to be there. You can just truly use the resources around focusing on interactions with family. Social environments is huge. Again, interactions with family, supportive relationships, all of these. Isolation, for example, will lead to higher levels of autism. Number 6, exposure to endocrine disruptors. One of my favorites that we don't talk about enough, things like bisphenol A, phthalates, things that you can find in most creams that families and women have put all over their stomachs. Doesn't count olive oil, but all of the other ones, we have all these fancy creams now that help with stretch marks as we're pregnant and growing. These can impact our brain development, both in utero and outside, as we're adding many of these to their bath water to help them with cradle cap. For whatever reason, many of the substances that we're using, we do not realize can have a neurodevelopmental factor. Epigenetic changes. And this is my favorite and the one that I will end on. Number 7 is do we know of an environmental factors that lead to epigenetic modifications? These are the things that impact gene expression and DNA sequence. This is one of the most studied areas today, and for good reason. It is super supportive to helping us understand with conditions like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, especially brain conditions that are a little more tricky to understand where the causation is and the correlations are in our environment. These modifications can affect brain development and function and are actually from our environment. So with that being said, when you look at, is it possible that my child has been impacted by their environment, just living in the world today with no knowledge of what's happening societally, right? We look at society as being very integrated and very rushing and not taking a lot of time to be able to pause, to question, to look at the things that are on the grocery shelves. We assume that we are safe based on the notion that someone is looking out for us. And currently, with the massive amounts of environmental changes that we have created man-made, no one can technically keep up to that. In many cases, this is not something that happened on purpose. It may have, don't get me wrong, but it could have easily happened by accident with people not being aware of the impact and the effect of some of these chemicals that impact the environment that our genes live in through absorption, through breathing in, and through ingestion. So with that, if this video was helpful to you, if you learned something, make sure to subscribe, follow, and feel free to share.